Good evening, everyone. I'm Justin Williams, Associate Professor of History and Director of the African American Studies program here at University of Detroit Mercy. And I welcome you to our guest lecture on hip hop culture featuring Elena Romero. As we reflect on hip hop's recent celebration of its 50th birthday and its rise from the block parties of the South Bronx to, as a writer from the New York Times put it, a fountain of constant innovation woven into nearly every corner of American life. For tonight's discussion, we're excited to host Elena Romero, who will focus on hip hop's enduring influence on what we wear. Professor Romero is assistant professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City and is author of Freestylin' How Hip Hop Changed the Fashion Industry and co-editor of Fresh Fly and Fabulous, 50 Years of Hip Hop Style. In addition to being one of the most sought out authorities on hip hop fashion, she's also a noted journalist and correspondent on the City University of New York television show LATiNAS. And without further ado, Elena Romero.
Oh, Professor Williams, thank you for having me and everyone. It's so nice to be here. I get to talk about one of my favorite subjects. So I'm going to start off by saying that although, hip hop has said to have a 50th birthday most recently, hip hop had existed well over 50 years. And hip hop has made a mark on US culture and around the world. Comprised of the MC, the DJ, the graffiti artist, the B-boy, the B-girl. The culture has impacted people around the world, unified through various backgrounds from the ghettos to the suburbs with the most identifiable fashions. And that has been once called hip-hop clothing, during the 90s was called urban fashion, and today has morphed into streetwear. So as hip hop has evolved, so have the styles. And in this short time that we're going to have together, I won't be able to really walk through the entire genre of 50 years, but at least give you a glimpse as to different themes that we find throughout fashions. And I'll end with my own future predictions as to where hip hop style is going next in the near and the immediate future. So let's get started. So I'll start off a little bit about me, just so you kind of know where my perspective is coming from. I am a 70s baby, so I fall under the hip hop generation. And being a hip hop baby, that meant that I was not necessarily there exactly at the moment, because I was a little bit on the younger end of the spectrum, but I definitely had some close proximity to hip hop as it was being created. And for our generation, the music was our soundtrack, and I kind of resonated to the classic mixtape. We listened to a lot of music for different reasons. Music that was current in our surroundings, so that could have been funk or punk or disco, pop, reggae, heavy metal. And in my own Latina households, I was listening to salsa and then this thing called hip hop. And for me, pre-MTV in New York City, the video journalist that I always pay homage to is Uncle Ralph McDaniels, who launched the show Video Music Box in 1983. And he gave New York kids the opportunity to be able to reach out and touch their up and coming musicians at the actual jams, at the concerts, do one-on-one interviews. So we really got to understand what was happening in our own sense, real time. And that's where the let me give a shout out really was birthed from, was through his show. What you see here, I am showing myself in the vulnerable state, the shirt in blue, the picture in blue with the Guess jeans, and I've got Huarache sneakers. Those are split toe. Those are the originals that came out in the early 90s. That's me in college. And you also have an image of my brass buckle name belt that I originally donated to the Museum of FIT, and some really important people within not only hip hop, but really hip hop and urban style. Everyone from Dapper Dan to April Walker, Tommy Hilfiger, Willie Esco, the guys from FUBU, Misa Hilton, and the names just go on. So these are not just people that I told stories about in the past and currently, but these are people that I feel are part of my community. So I have both an observer and a participant point of view, and that should tell you a little bit about then where my connection to the subject matter comes from. So I decided to start this conversation with Biggie. I'm being biased. I am from Brooklyn, as was Biggie. And interesting enough, today is the day of Miss Wallace's viewing. She passed recently. And I brought up this date of May 22nd, 2022. 15 minutes after sunset on that date, the Empire State Building, which is the image that you're seeing to the corner right,
Elena,
ended up lighting up.
sorry to interrupt. You just need to share your presentation.
Oh, well, look at that. See, I thought I was sharing it already. Sorry about that. Can everyone see my screen? Are you seeing that, Justin?
I'm unable to see it.
Well, let's see. Sorry about these technical difficulties, because on my end, it says it's sharing. Let's try it again.
Everyone else says they can see it.
Okay, so I don't know
So
what's
it's
going
just
on.
so it's just us then. Sorry about that.
Okay, I'm gonna go back. Sorry about that. I hope, are you seeing it now, Justin?
No, but it's okay. Please continue.
Okay, all right. Well, so 15 minutes after sunset on this date, May 21st, 2022, at the Empire State Building, which you should now be able to see at the corner of your screen, was the Empire State Building lit up in red, white, and blue colors with a rotating crown with the number 50 on the mast as a tribute to Biggie. Really a commemorative moment on so many different occasions, right? It was New York City. We were offering limited Metro cards, as you see in the other image. It was Biggie's birthday, Biggie being one of the artists signed to Bad Boy Records in the early 90s. And so hip hop and fashion took center stage. Biggie representing the big and tall, those who recognize his style. He wore everything from Brooklyn's Carl Kanai to Versace. And then I wanted to also bring up some other kind of historic moments for those of you who are Super Bowl fans. In 2022, we had some of the greats perform, including Snoop and Mary J. Blige and Dr. Dre with Kendrick Lamar and Eminem. And then most recently, you might have recalled seeing Kendrick Lamar have his own performance. And there was a lot of talk around not only his symbolic performance, but also what he wore. In this case, he was wearing very expensive Celine jeans and some custom items as well, along with some Nike Air DT Max 96 sneakers, all styled by Taylor McNeil. That's really important because as Women's Wear Daily, which is one of the publications I used to work for, noted in its publication, the French brand Celine was estimated at earning $2.3 million in media impact value, according to Launch Metrics. And so I bring this up because time and time again, from a historical point of view, there is this connection with hip hop and fashion and how placing or product placement on a hip hop persona can absolutely have great impact on sales. And most recently, Kendrick Lamar is a great example of that. So I want to provide you with a quote to kind of summarize how I view hip hop and style. Hip hop became the Black Panther of the fashion industry. And what that did was it turned the fashion industry upside down and inside out. What it did is it forced onto the industry this idea around diversity. And it had not really attempted really prior to that in really seeing our value, from the hiring and the designing, the marketing, to celebrating people of color. And what hip hop did was really change the face of the runway. This is everything from bald heads to braids, larger frames to big booties to various shades of beautiful Black beauty. But most importantly, what hip hop did was it spoke the language that manufacturers and retailers understood best. It made dollars and cents SENSE, but also CENTS. So kind of walking you very quickly through some important historical facts. As noted before in the beginning of my discussion, hip hop music did was created well before 73, and I'm kind of quoting hip hop photographer Ernie Penacoli, but we end up hearing the term hip hop being coined years after in popular vocabulary. Some of you may know DJ Kool Herc, known for throwing a legendary party in the Bronx, but we must also make sure we also tell the story of his sister, Cindy, who really served as his promoter. So women being side by side in this story and this narrative. And that's a running theme that I, as someone who recently curated a hip hop style exhibition, did with intentionality. A lot of times the story of hip hop and the story of hip hop fashion tends to be looked at through a male gaze. And it's important to understand and acknowledge the major contributions that women have had in hip hop and in style. So, this jam happened in the local building's recreational room at 1520 Cedric Avenue. And kind of we've been using culture-wise, this being the moment where kind of we commemorate the birth of hip hop. And just, I thought you get for kicks, girls came into the party for 25 cents and guys for 50 cents. So now we talk about hip hop and style and the various elements. So I mentioned earlier the elements of hip hop, including the MC, the DJ, the B-boy, B-girl, the aerosol artist, and we've also have attributed knowledge being the fifth element. Unofficially, we would say that style becomes the unofficial sixth element. This image is actually one of many that I'll be showing throughout the presentation from the exhibition that was held at the museum at FIT called Fresh Fly Fabulous, 50 Years of Hip Hop Style, the same name of our book. So within our exhibit, and important to discuss, is kind of the looks that were worn on the streets, the looks that were worn in the nightclubs here in New York City. Disco Fever in the Bronx was a very popular nightclub where we would be able to see fashionable youth coming in. And these are some of the Polaroids that would kind of give you a good illustration of a wide variety of looks, right? You're seeing athletics looks, you're seeing the cowboy theme that has made a resurgence. We can thank Beyonce for that, to kind of looks that you would find on the Get Fresh crew to the B-boys in the Bronx. So there's always this kind of myth that young people didn't dress up, and they did. And we even notice in denim, for example, this image that I'm showing you onto my left, the Levi jeans had permanent creases, giving kind of that feeling of kind of tailored pants. We would wear them with Pro-Ked sneakers in various colors. We also wore tracksuits, Lotto and Isadora sneakers. So 80s was about preppy and athletics, and that was something that we reinterpreted and made our own. Another theme that you will find within hip hop style is Afrocentricity, and hip hop has had quite a relationship with that alongside the music. So I, growing up in the 90s, was absolutely influenced by groups like X-Clan and Chuck D, and women artists like Queen Latifah, the Native Tongues. And so you start seeing the embellishments, the leather African pendants, the use of the body with various accessories. And that's something that Cross Colors did take note. Cross Colors launched in 1990. It is a brand that was launched on the West Coast. An interesting story, Carl Jones and TJ Walker launched the brand. Carl Jones coming out of the surf business. And the idea behind Cross Colors was obviously an idea or theme around unity, but Afrocentricity was a key component of that, from the choice of colors to the fabrics that were used, and the messaging of unity was to bring together young youth against gang violence that was so prominent at the time in Los Angeles. Something that also runs prevalent throughout hip hop style is the idea of custom apparel. And while many know the name Dapper Dan now, it's been a household name. That was a fairly new phenomenon, all thanks to Black Twitter. Dapper Dan has such a wonderful story. Really one of our OGs, you could say. He had been creating styles based off of luxury logos that were prevalent at that time. And he created or embossed logoing on his fabrics and would create original designs. So these brands were not accessible within our communities, but he gave accessibility to community members through his designs. And so there wasn't a up and coming artist that wasn't wearing or shopping Dapper Dan. But not Dapper Dan wasn't the only custom tailor in Harlem. We would also have 5001 Flavors. Guy Woods, for example, would go to work alongside Puffy and create a lot of the custom leather looks that you found in his early music videos. April Walker, founder of Walker Wear, would be inspired by a Dapper Dan, and she would create her own custom apparel shop in Brooklyn, creating custom tailored clothing. The Shirt Kings at the Coliseum Mall in Queens, they're really responsible for the airbrushed cartoon-like imagery that you would find on sweatshirts and t-shirts. And this idea of kind of embracing the DIY or do it yourself was something that was a common thread. These days, you're seeing a lot of custom apparel by luxury brands for artists. 5001 Flavors has a long roster of artists that they work with, including Fat Joe, seen here, a custom 5001 Flavors outfit for him. Now, when we think of hip hop style, I think the quintessential look that everyone thinks about is the baggy look, and that's not only quintessential to the 90s hip hop, but it really kind of now gives us an introduction to having our own brand. So early hip hop style was being borrowed from existing brands that existed, and now we start seeing in the 90s fashion entrepreneurs who didn't necessarily go to fashion school. I mentioned Carl Jones and TJ Walker over at Cross Colors on the West Coast. Carl Kanai here in Brooklyn along April Walker. What they really focused on was creating fashion that really spoke to their generation, to their community, and really played with the silhouettes of their designs, really making clothes that would fit the bodies in a very different way than what we were seeing from European brands. So, for example, you would find Cross Colors. They would still keep the waist very similar in terms of to actual size, but where they sized up was in the hip and the leg area, kind of giving a much more slouched silhouette for hip hop artists and fans. And while the clothes were categorized as kind of young men's in the men's section of department stores and retail spaces, the clothes were unisex. Women, including myself, would wear Cross Colors, and TLC was one of the 90s groups that were well known for wearing Cross Colors throughout their image. I want to talk about the importance of the stylist as well. Early hip hop, there were no wardrobe budgets and artists would dress themselves. And so some of the early fashion architects known to cultivate images, well-known images that have lasted the test of time include Misa Hilton, known for working with a number of artists. The art form that she created, or the look that has withstand the test of time, one that is timeless and probably one of the most clicked looks to date on Google, would be the one on Lil' Kim, worn at the 1999 Music Awards. And that is this purple outfit with the seashell like form on her breast. That outfit really catapulted Misa into international fame. She's also known for giving Lil' Kim various monochromatic looks. For example, the looks that you're seeing here for the Crush on You video. Another well-known stylist and creative director is the one and only June Ambrose. June Ambrose, a longtime personal stylist of Jay-Z, is very well known, not only in the styling community, but she's also been an architect working with many brands, including Puma. Among her well-known documented looks include Missy's The Rain outfits and Diddy's More Money, More Problems, the famous shiny suits that Puffy and Mace wore. And then I put the word American designer influence. And I say that because when we talk about hip hop style, I think there are certain brands that seem to be othered and not put under the same umbrella. And I want to make clear that hip hop style is American fashion, and therefore the designers that came out of that space are also American designers. But in this context that I'm referring to, the quote unquote American designer influence, I'm specifically speaking to the pre-existing designer brands that had those elements of red, white, and blue. We wore in the 70s designer jeans by Jordache and Calvin Klein, kind of the mainstream coveted brands that kind of held a special resonance. And remember how I talked about Kendrick Lamar recently and what he did for Celine jeans? The same can be said with Snoop Dogg when he made his Saturday Night Live appearance wearing a Tommy shirt. Instantaneously, Tommy had a spike in sales. And Tommy has had a number of artists, be behind his brand, including Wu-Tang Clan, and here's an outfit out of one of their music videos. And not just Tommy, right? We talk about Ralph Lauren and Polo, and there's another brand that has been pushed by young youths of Brooklyn. So it's important to understand that the most in-demand brands of the various periods, right? The Ralph Laurens, the Tommy Hilfigers, and various European brands, the Gucci, Versace, Louis Vuitton, these were brands that were not as accessible, though it was the hip hop youth that would make them, the big popular brand among youth of that time and of our current day. Which brings us to musicians. And so musicians have always had concert merch. But very quickly, as hip hop was rising, artists and moguls realized that they were able to make more money from the brands that they were creating. And therefore, they decided that they wanted to go beyond just concert merch. Among the early hip hop folks that created their own fashion brands was Chuck D. With Rap Style International. And shortly thereafter, Vinny from Naughty by Nature created Naughty Gear. We would see success at a much larger scale with Wu-Tang Clan's Wu Wear being one of several brands selected to be part of Macy's assortment in the mid-90s. And of course, a little bit later into the 2000s, we start seeing the Rocawear and the Sean John influences really taking on the runway during New York Fashion Week. Sean Combs, interesting enough, launched his brand in '98. Some thought that the brand was helping elevate the urban brands at the moment because it was a bit oversaturated, and his brand kind of rejuvenated or gave more life to the market. It would be noted that in 2004, Combs became the first Council of Designers of America award recipient. So as we move on, what we're noticing is now going from hip hop artists being excluded, not having access to high-end or luxury and European brands, to now we're seeing this collaboration between hip-hop and high fashion. I mentioned earlier stylist and creative director Misa Hilton. So Misa Hilton would form a partnership with MCM. You would find Dapper Dan forming a relationship with Gucci. Later, he has a relationship with Puma and The Gap more recently. And then you might be familiar with the brand Off-White, designed by the late Virgil Abloh, who he would go on to head up design for Louis Vuitton. These ideas of mergers or collaborations between hip hop and high fashion was the perfect synergy between the artists who have risen to international fame and now are sitting in the front rows, are in all the exclusive advertisement campaigns, and they themselves are leading collaborative, really exclusive product assortment lines. So now hip hop artists become the muses of luxury. We start seeing them wear various designers on the red carpet. These two looks are among my favorite that I had in the MFIT exhibition. We start seeing looks like playwright Jeremy O. Harris and Kid Cudi pushing gender norms and going past these kind of binary ideals. Chance the Rapper, if you look at this particular outfit, the Ralph Lauren tuxedo he wore at the 2021 Met Gala was inspired by the Polo Stadium series. And others like Cardi B would be muses for designers like Terry Mugler and Megan Thee Stallion. I love her in this gold wing ensemble by Moschino. One of the important things to note that women are now really being courted by so many of the high-end and luxury designers for red carpet events, and are now, wearing these brands in as part of their kind of their everyday cadence. And as we continue to talk about hip hop and collaborations, which is kind of where we are now, right? Hip hop went so mainstream that it just made complete sense to collaborate the artists with the major brands that they have been influenced by and are inspired by. Fashion companies had no choice but to realize that they would be missing out if they wouldn't tap into the hip hop market. So several collaborations come to mind, early collaborations that we featured in our exhibition. Adidas, you probably recall doing the multi-million-dollar agreement with DMC. Not only did they sign them as the first rap group to sign a endorsement deal with an athletic brand, but they also came out with their own kind of apparel and hats. Fenty with Puma, Cardi B with Reebok, and just a few years ago at the 35th anniversary in 2017, Nike tapped 5 designers to rework the iconic white-on-white Air Force One, and among those designers was the late Abloh. Here you see an image of the Louis Vuitton Nike Air Force One collaboration by Virgil. By the time we got to the 2010s, we start seeing designers who grew up in hip hop also now start showing their influences in their own design and gain recognition for their own creative geniuses. So I want to move into kind of my prediction as to where are we, right? I kind of briefly talked about the 50 years and some of the common themes and trends we have seen. And I think at the moment, we have seen quite a bit of collaboration. There might still be a few more that might be pending or in the works, but I want to look ahead and see where fashion could go. At one point, in the fashion industry, I had heard someone from a forecasting agency say that urban fashion was dead. And in some ways, you could say it wasn't dead, but it just evolved. It became something else. And this is where hip hop, the lines of pure hip hop style blurred with mainstream fashion, and now is what has become streetwear. So I have kind of 3 predictions that I'll put forward, and then I'll start taking some questions. The first is that I see more women from the hip hop side, the female artists, creating their own brands. There is so much room for that area. Rihanna has shown a multi-billion-dollar success formula in so many different products. And so I think there are still plenty of women who can capture the market. Young women are starving for fashion that speaks to them from their community, that addresses their fit, their needs for their bodies. So I do see that there are going to be a number of new junior fashion brands with an urban flair in the near or immediate future. And I hope that the Gen Z artists, and there's so many that have amazing style and have a voice in hip hop, this is a really wonderful time for women in music, will become fashion entrepreneurs themselves and go beyond concert merch to develop brands, have fashion brands that will speak to not only their audiences, but to the fashion consumer overall. My second prediction is that there's always going to be something of a resurgence, right? Because with every generation, they need to discover or rediscover some of the classics. I can't believe that what I wore in the 90s is now called vintage. So I do see a resurgence of vintage styles from the 90s and the 2000s. And I also see, because I think we've gotten into kind of an extreme mode, and I still think there's still some room for celebrities and getting into the fashion industry, but I think we're going to see a resurgence, a reintroduction of the traditional designer, or rather the non-music celebrity or entity. I think the consumer is much more conscious and aware of what they want. And I think at some point they're going to kind of go back to some of the original roots. So I also see that happening. And then lastly, I see what I've coined kind of resistance and community. And I'm seeing and hoping that the same applies in the music. I mentioned in the 80s and the 90s having Afrocentricity, powerful social messages and political messages through music. And I see that fashion being the perfect canvas for that as well. So I see quite a bit. It's starting to happen now with political statement tees. I'm hoping that we see a reemergence of the mom and pop specialty store. When urban fashion blew up, it was built by mom and pop specialty stores across the United States. And once a lot of these brands moved to department store business, it ended up hurting the small mom and pop specialty store. No longer did they have kind of the small exclusive brands, and they could not compete with the majors. And I think in this political and social climate, the consumer is very well aware of where they want to spend their money. And I think they're going to want to spend it back in their community and to support the designers that support them. So that is also something that I see. So more opportunities for that indie or small brands to gain popularity, for folks to give it a try, for mom and pop specialty stores, and e-commerce as well, which is another wonderful opportunity to be able to reach folks on a global scale. Before I take questions, I want to make sure that I give you an opportunity to also stay connected with me. You can follow me on Instagram at Prof. E. Romero, or you can send me an email through my website at elenaromero.com. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can start taking questions and